Alright, today's video, it's not going to be about the budget, surprisingly. Um, Actually, it's going to be on getting to know your officials. One thing I have a concern with, at least in not just my community, but on a state level as well, there are a lot of people who are under the impression, and it's just their own fault, coupled with just many different things that I don't need to get into, but a lot of different people across the state, really across the country, but Pacific. But since I live in Maryland, I'm talking obviously about specifically about the state of Maryland. There is a problem with knowledge of elected officials, and I don't mean on the federal level, because if you want to contact your congressman or senator, most people know how to do that, either by email or over the phone, and those that don't can find the information themselves. For one reason or another, it seems like you have to be in the political know, or you have to read the newspaper a lot to know who your state level officials are. And I'm talking, of course, about the state legislator. In the state of Maryland, we have the General Assembly on the House and the Senate side. One senator, depending on the county, and specifically where I live in Montgomery County, there are 3 delegates and 1 senator per district. And but it differs in each jurisdiction in the state. But anyway, that's not the point. My concern is that there are just so many people that don't know, who your elected official, who their state level elected officials are. Well, they could just go on a website and find out, and go to the different websites. I'm actually going to link the websites to find out your elected officials, to find out your state elected official in the state of Maryland, because I think it's vitally important. There is a publication. Where is it? Right here. I want to block out the name, but this is the Maryland, it's probably backwards, but basically what it says is the Maryland Elected Officials Guide. Basically what it is, it's a guide, right here, it's a guide of elected officials in the state of Maryland. You can get it at your local library, you can get it at, I believe, your local government building, if you know where it is, and your local county government building. And basically, again, what it holds is, I'll just point out, it holds, it has information, on the governor, and the different delegates and things like that. It has a snapshot, and then you get further in, it has a little bit more information. It has phone numbers and things like that, phone numbers for the office and email addresses, so you can get in contact with your elected officials. Because I think there are a lot of people who have issues that they can address on a state level, and they think that they can address them on a federal level, but it turns out they go to the federal level thinking they can address a state issue, and for one reason or another, the federal level official doesn't give, because they're just inundated with work on the federal level. Their staff can't give that constituent the information in relation to their state elected official. And that's, it's not a party thing. It has nothing to do with party. It has nothing to do with a certain political party not, not educating the people enough. Well, the Democratic Party is a prominent party in the state of Maryland. That doesn't mean that the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or any of the many independent parties in the state of Maryland are at fault for not educating the masses, just the constituency as a whole in the state of Maryland. I think they are at fault to an extent, because they should have a program where they do alert the constituency once they reach that voting age of 18, alert them to their state local officials. If the parents don't know, then the kids growing up, I think there should be, I know at least in Montgomery County, there's a course called NSL, National, State, and Local Government. And basically what that means is, they talk about it on a national level, on a state level, and on a local level. I remember taking NSL back when I was in high school, back in the dark ages, and, on the state level, I don't remember anything being talked. The only extent they talked about was, for state level, was, that I can recall, was the governor and really the executive branch. They didn't really talk about the legislative branch, which I feel like is, I don't want to say it's more important than the executive branch, because the executive branch does make, obviously, executive decisions, but at the same time, the legislative branch is probably stronger. And it's really like an untapped resource, because there's so many people in the because, there's so many legislators that represent, large groups of people in the districts that they represent. they need to be tapped for whatever issues you want to bring up, whatever district you live in the state of Maryland. I think that once enough people realize, who their elected officials are, they can call them out and say, I have a problem. The budget thing, which I touched on and Crack Rock Kid touched on in the last two the last two videos that we did. I think that's extremely important that elected officials get called on and say, the constituents calling them and say, how is the budget going to affect me? I'm in this tax bracket. How is it going to affect me on a state level? I think that's extremely important that constituents go out and ask their elected officials what's going on. How is this going to affect me? How is what you're doing on the education, or in my community, how is that going to affect me as a tax-paying citizen in your district? How is that going to affect me? I think if enough people call on the carpet their elected officials, then effective change will happen, no matter what political party's in power. Yes, the Democratic Party's in power right now, and they have a lot to answer for, but at the same time, if enough people call them to the carpet and say, I have a problem with this, that, or the other, whether it be the budget, whether it be education, whether it be crime, whatever the issue is, I think it needs to be addressed, and it's not addressed enough. I think that the only people who really know during session, during the General Assembly session, is the people in the know are really the lobbyists, and just the constituents who are just the constituents who have who go to all the events. I don't want to call them the political in crowd, because that's kind of negative to those folks and the people who aren't in the political in crowd, but those kind of folks, the people that go to everything and you see them everywhere and that kind of stuff. Those are the real people. Those are really the only people who know elected, know the state level elected officials. And I think if enough regular Joe constituents not only went out to the events and kind of called elected officials out in the town hall forums, or when these elected officials are walking their districts, or when they see them in the supermarket or at the bank or whatever. Just call, if you see them in the street, call them on the carpet on these things. I'm not saying go up and punch them in the stomach and say, what the fuck are you doing to my neighborhood? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying physically threaten them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if you have a problem or concern on the state level and you think it's a federal issue, see what the state can do about it. And get in contact with your state elected official and see what they can do to help you. Because I'm sure, if enough people got together and said, this is an issue that we're going to talk about, and enough people went ahead and called their elected officials and took the necessary effort to get something like that taken care of, then I think that issue then I think whatever issue that is can be addressed. Like I said, whether it's the budget, whether it's environment, whether it's crime, whether it's education, whatever the issue may be. And obviously those 4 issues taper down into many, many different things. But, I think that any of those issues can be touched on. And I think, again, if enough people constantly tap those sources, then I think effective change can be made. So again, I'm going to post a link to on the left-hand side menu, to how to get in contact. If you're a Maryland resident and you want to get in contact with your state elected official, I think I'm going to post a link to find out who your elected officials are. I'm also going to post a link to the legislative and executive branch, and I might post one to a few other branches of the Maryland state government as well, just so people know that there is, it's not just the Maryland, it's not, when you think of the Maryland government, it's not just the governor and the General Assembly. There's also the comptroller, the state's attorney, or not state's attorney, the attorney general, Secretary of State, Secretary of Health. There are many positions in the state government that are obviously, copied from not copied, but replicated from the federal government to represent the state. And I don't think enough people know to get in contact with those folks. So I'm going to post a link for all those things in the state of Maryland so people have access to all that information. And so you can, because there are a lot of people who are going to read this blog. It's going to be posted all over the place. And I think if enough people have that information, get out and make that conceded effort to make effective change, then effective change can happen.